Joining me now is the law firm of Katyal and Weissman, which is on permanent retainer for our show. Hopefully they agree to that. Neil Katyal is the former acting U.S. Solicitor General, and Andrew Weissman is the former FBI General Counsel. So, Andrew, I wanted to just start there with the witnesses, because if you're one of these co-defendants, and they do decide to make a deal with prosecutors, how does that actually work? And is the target of all of that Trump, or could the target also be other high-level co-defendants?
So in terms of the targets, it could be both. And, you know, you're in for a penny, in for a pound. You can't pick and choose. If you cooperate, you have to tell the truth, the good and the bad, about everything that you know, whether it's about yourself or about any other crime that anyone else committed. You can't say, by the way, I'm going to tell you about my friends, you know, I'm going to leave that out, but I'm going to tell you about my foes. You also have to cooperate fully at the state and federal level. So this is where Fani Willis and Jack Smith align in interest. And Jack Smith is really helped by, for the reasons you stated, Jen, by Fani Willis's charges, because those are not pardonable. So those are extra weight on people like Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, Jeff Clark, Chesebro. Those people now are feeling the pressure to cooperate because they cannot hope for a presidential pardon to get them out of trouble.
So it sounds like, and I didn't know that before, Andrew, that if somebody participates and flips, I should say, in the Georgia case, that could be helpful to the federal cases. So, Neil, let me ask you, as you're looking at this list of 18 co-defendants, who poses the largest threat to Donald Trump on that list?
Well, I think it is all of the above. It's hard to say. I think any of the, if lawyers for any of the 18, Jen, I think would be advising their client right now to think seriously about flipping and providing evidence, because you don't have the ability to kind of, hope that you're going to get a pardon from the president or from some Republican president in the future. So, I'd be looking first at Rudy Giuliani, who's been obviously steadfast and loyal to this point, but Trump isn't paying his bills. And so, that's obviously going to create some problems. And he has a lot of exposure. I would also say Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, who's kind of danced this dance for a long time about avoiding charges, by somewhat cooperating with the feds. He's, I think, being called in Georgia in a much more dramatic way because he's indicted. Ken Chesebro, all of these people are rich targets.
So speaking of Mark Meadows and his dancing, just to keep going with Neil's analogy there was a new report this morning, Andrew, that Mark Meadows told prosecutors he didn't remember Trump declassifying documents in the Mar-a-Lago case. I don't know how important that is, so let me ask you that. But also, what does that tell you, or what do you read into that about his willingness to cooperate in the other cases, where he's a witness in many of them?
Well, this is like the big mystery, is exactly what's happening with Mark Meadows and this sort of Sphinx-like character, where I think, as Neil correctly says, he's trying to sort of have it, both ways, where he sort of gives some information, hoping that if he sort of partially cooperates, he won't get federally charged. He clearly is giving some information to the feds. He is reported to have said that he offered to help Donald Trump go through his boxes and return the material that needs to be returned, and that Donald Trump rebuffed him. So that's clearly coming from Mark Meadows. But at the same time, there's information that came out that he basically removed very damning evidence from his book, where it now is very anodyne, where the initial draft was really much more damning. And that seems to be coming more from the ghostwriters who would know that side of the story. I think this is definitely more to come. I think that both Fani Willis and Jack Smith are basically going to be telling Mark Meadows, or have told him, you either are a defendant or you are a cooperator who has pled guilty. But it's one or the other. You can't be both.
So just to pick off of that mention of the book, because there was a new report Andrew just referenced about an earlier version of Meadows' 2021 book mentioning the episode at Bedminster where Trump showed classified war plans to Meadows' publicists and ghostwriters to give more meat to the bones there. Neil, and then the report suggests that he personally edited it out because he didn't believe at the time that Trump would have possessed a document like that at Bedminster. I will leave judgment on that out there for a moment. But, Neil, could he be in trouble for that? Is that something that he could face legal issues around?
It's certainly possible. So as the reporting says, basically the ghostwriter for Mark Meadows saw this 4-page highly classified document at Bedminster, and that was in the initial description of the book and the initial draft, and it's been removed. Now, it could be removed because Meadows says, I didn't actually think that was true. Seems implausible given all of the evidence we already have about that 4-page document. And remember, that is part of the basis. It looks like it's the same document that was the basis for Jack Smith filing new charges against Donald Trump just a couple of weeks ago. But I suppose he can try and say, look, I just didn't believe that that was actually accurate. I didn't see the document, so I didn't want to put it in there. But it sure seems like it's a cover-up, Jen. And so I do think that creates the risk of additional exposure for Mark Meadows. The other piece of the story that Mark Meadows is saying there was no standing order for the to declassify documents, I think is not all that surprising. I mean, none of us who've dealt with classified information thought there would be such a standing order. So it's kind of like basically discovering that there's sugar in dessert. Yeah, we all knew that. But it's helpful at the end of the day to have, President Trump's former chief of staff say, no, there was no standing declassification order.
You heard it now, sugar and dessert, and also there was no standing order. Andrew, I wanted to ask you before I let you guys go about this report. I mean, Trump was supposed to have a press conference tomorrow to reveal all of this damning information we all, I think, suspected didn't exist. He then canceled, citing his lawyers. What did you think of that? Do you think he's finally listening to his lawyers, or what made him decide that now?
Well, the idea that Donald Trump has, as he put it, irrefutable, that's his term, evidence that the election was stolen, but he just decided he's not going to tell you what it is. I mean, that's just completely laughable, whether it's on legal advice or not. I mean, since when does he listen to lawyers? I mean, look at the Mar-a-Lago case where he completely didn't listen to the lawyers saying this stuff has to be turned over. In fact, he is charged with lying to his lawyers. I do think that he is listening to his counsel, and I think for at least the immediate term, there's a reason, because he is about to be arraigned in Georgia. A bail determination needs to be made there. In addition, Judge Chutkan is about to, in the federal D.C. case, decide on the trial date on August 28th. And I think his lawyers had to say, look, for the moment, zip it up. Like, you do not do anything that's going to provoke a judge, because you know what? You are no longer the president of the United States. You have 4 judges overseeing you. You are in a precarious position right now.
Neal Katyal and Andrew Weissmann, thank you both for putting me on your sliding fee scale. I appreciate it.